So very good day to all of you listeners out there. Today we have David Tian, our friend.
Hello, everyone.
And of course, Lyra joining us also.
Hello, hello.
And we're doing a special episode on 31st of August, National Day, Merdeka Day, whatever you want to call it, right? And we all of us are Sarawakians. We are in West Malaysia. But recently there has been this discussion, right? Especially from East Malaysians. Why do we even need to celebrate 31st of August? Have you been hearing that kind of chatter?
Yeah. Some of my colleagues, some of my friends are asking me, hey, you are Sarawakian, why you are celebrating this kind of West Malaysian kind of festival? I mean, I don't mind to have an extra holiday. But if you want to track back to a history, if you say this is a Independence Day or Malaysia is not there yet. But if we look back to USA history, the first Independence Day is also the 13th state. So now there are 50 states. So let's say the other 33 states, not 33, 17 states, 37 states no need to celebrate. I don't think so lah. So it's like okay for me.
That's a good, interesting argument because now of course I think long ago in this show we kind of mentioned that in fact 31st of August was supposed to be the official Malaysia Day. That's what they wanted to do when Sabah, Sarawak and Singapore joined. But because of ratification delay by United Nations. So would you say, I mean maybe this one for Lyra, would you say that it was the intention all this while to celebrate 31st of August, and maybe from there, the implied meaning was that all this while Malaya kind of thought everyone is joining me to form a bigger Malaya. Do you feel there is that kind of tone out there?
Yeah, I definitely do think so. I mean, as in with what Tunku's intention was, I think it was really original. I mean, even in history, we read about the fact that it was supposed to be on the 31st of August, 1963, just that it was delayed. So hence Sabah and Sarawak, they are sort of like celebrating at a different date. And because I guess we are separated by a sea apart. So we don't really feel that because, I guess growing up, we never really knew about Malaysia Day.
Yeah.
So it's until when we study history in Form 4, Form 5, only then we realize, hey, it's supposed to be on 16 September. I mean, we don't realize that at all. So it's like all this while we were like just happily tagging along. But when you really think about it, I mean, this sort of discussion really happens when there is more call for Sarawak, for Sarawakians. That sort of thing, you sort of maybe look towards Singapore and, hey, how come they can have like nationalism sort of spirit? Every Singaporean is like celebrating the National Day, and how come we don't really do it as much in Malaysia? But there is also, I guess, the other side is also true, as in when Sarawakians look at how West Malaysians are really just thinking higher of Merdeka Day more than Malaysia Day, then you somewhat felt like, hey, it's a bit unfair. But you can't really separate the two also. I felt like you have to, I mean, there is no Malaysia if there is no kemerdekaan for the whole Malaya as well. So I guess you kind of have to like look at it as a package. I think like these days I will look at it more like a package in the sense that you have to celebrate both. I mean, because that is what formed Malaysia for who it is. But you can't also overemphasize on one of it without thinking the implication for the other.
Yeah. And David, because you mentioned previously that you started your interest in government and politics even when you are still back in Sarawak, right? Of course. But 16th of September was not a public holiday for the longest time. And maybe to help our viewers and listeners, maybe you can, like of course Lara already mentioned when the discussion about call for Sarawak independence, but from your observation, when did this all began? Is this a relatively new thing?
For my personal experience, I only kind of emphasize 16th of September when I was primary school. Suddenly one day, Najib declared, 9/16 is a public holiday. I'm like, rupanya. There's a public holiday of a formation of this nation. I'm like, okay. But that time the version is Sabah and Sarawak joined Malaysia. But actually we from Singapore, Malaya, Sabah and Sarawak, we form Malaysia together. So after I realized the difference of these two versions, I start to dig down into why there's such different version of this kind of mindset. So during my high school era, I think this kind of Sarawak for Sarawakian movement are more like in every schools, every high school people talk about this, and people go to the go to the ceramah, go to the gathering, talk about Sarawakian. We need to fight for our rights. And sometimes I can feel a little bit of resentment that I feel like I am a victim of West Malaysian. I am a victim of Kuala Lumpur.
So you felt that yourself?
Yes, of course.
Because of the ceramah, all these
Yeah,
things.
all the things. And I feel like I'm so proud of Sarawakian. But after that, I think why I have this kind of the feel of resentment, maybe it is because of the hatred. Maybe it is because of the unrighteousness we faced in the history. But after I go through all this process of all the history stuff, I choose one thing that, okay, after all the hoo-ha, all the emotion, what can I do as a Sarawakian if we want to make all the Sarawakian life better? If you want to make Sarawakian life better, actually you are making Malaysian life better. Like if every Malaysian have a better life, it's also benefit Sarawak. So after I think like that, I'm like, okay, why I need to hold the resentment for my whole life?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like both of you come from the perspective that the whole thing is linked. You can't really separate because somehow there's this mindset. I mean, again, just to remind all the viewers and listeners, all three of us are from Sarawak originally. I mean, we're all here in Kuala Lumpur at the moment for work or settlement or whatever. But from the recent, when I talk about recent, I talk about maybe 10, 20 years, the manifestation of Sarawak for Sarawakian, it almost felt like there is that undertone that if we are on our own, it's going to be better. But I think a lot of times we have been discussing that if Sarawak, for example, can demonstrate a better model, it will actually help the whole nation. So I want to kind of go into that point of view because one of the frequently discussed things, of course, now even with federal and state, is really the tussle between the two. And of course, those of you who understand Malaysian history, federal has been dominating for a long time. But all of a sudden, Sarawak now become one of the first states to be able to demand, and not only demand, able to get. Of course, immigration, they always been under their control, but now Sarawak government is asking for education, health. So I want to talk about federal and state. Okay, now of course, coming from Sarawak point of view, and staying here, having experience and interact, I think Lyra, you've been here for more than 10 years already.
Yeah.
More than 10 years. Maybe not as long, but getting there. And so I want to ask, like, what's your view, in terms of, federal versus state, and from the Sarawakian perspective, especially since we are talking about 31st of August. I mean, I can give you an example. Some people will be like, oh, that shouldn't even be an issue. We don't want state and federal. We want our own power. That will be one side. And the other one will be like what Najib was saying, you all are joining us. But where do you stand? And maybe we'll start with David. What do you think about this federal versus state? And what are the issues? It can come from both the state or federal, and maybe just a bit of the outlook of the future. What are we looking at? Maybe the next 5 years.
I think to all the listeners out there, we can review Malaysia as we can have a new perspective of Malaysia, because every people in Semenanjung is talking about, wow, Sarawak, you want to independence, Sabah you want to independence, you have your autonomy already. So for them, Sarawak is very unique, Sabah is very unique, every time they go to Sarawak, you go to immigration, you feel like foreign nation. But for Sarawakian, we feel like actually you take you fight for your autonomy it's deep down in our DNA, I guess, because of the historical factors, because of what we have been through. But why not we think about that? Every state in Semenanjung also fight for their own rights. Because just now you mentioned that Malaysia is too over centralized. It is true. And why not we give every state the rights that they have? Like some of the Donald Trump and Elon Musk have the talk. Donald Trump mentioned he want to give the education to all the states and see what state doing better. Yep. Why not we do that as well? I mean,
have
just
a competition.
Just an imagination. So if let's say some state perform well and all the parents in Malaysia send their children to the states, then we can compete.
No need to go to Singapore already.
No need to go to... Like Johor want to have their own syllabus and Sarawak want to have their own syllabus. Why we always think, when we talk about states, right, we only think about Sabah and Sarawak. Why not all the states in Semenanjung?
Very interesting. And it reminds me of in 2018, you remember the first ever change of federal government in the history of Malaysia, peacefully I must add. And at that time, there was this law conference I attended. I remember Liu Qintong was there at the time. I think he was a deputy minister. So there was this professor from NUS, and he came, and I think Robert Lau Jr. was there also talking about the Sarawak rights and things like that. But this NUS professor, I can't recall his name, but he was saying that, look, why should the rights why should just Sabah and Sarawak request for the rights? What about all the other states? Because of course you can make the argument while they already formed into Malaya, but that's a very artificial way of looking at it. Malaya actually consists of many states. British basically just lumped them together. So that's a very interesting free market competitions. And of course we mentioned in one of the episodes, Lyra, that one of our friends mentioned, then some states will lag behind. But it is exactly when you compare and contrast that you see who are doing a better job and what's happening in US right now.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. As in, because, I mean, as Sarawakian, I think I'm personally more sympathetic towards like Terengganu. Because, I mean, comparing the economic model and things like that, I mean, these are oil producing states. And even, I mean, with Sabah, Sarawak as well. So I felt like, hey, I mean, I was surprised because when I went to Terengganu once, and I was like, for an oil-producing state, they are so backward-looking. So I've kind of like felt sad for them as well because, I mean, all these different states, they're also having to come to Klang Valley to make a living. I mean, even for Sabah Sarawakians as well. So, I mean, I felt like if there is more decentralization, not necessarily like a separation altogether, as in, I mean, what David mentioned, the separation of power in terms of, hey, let's have a more competing policy in terms of education and why not we also replicate the same for business model as well? I mean, you could have some states like what happened in the United States where it's not feasible to have certain businesses flourishing because of some tax policy and things like that. I mean, can you imagine if different states have different tax benefits to the business model? Can you imagine the whole GDP of the nation can really, really grow to the whole next level? So it's really like if one state is flourishing, the rest of the state can also sort of, you can think about it and replicate it. And also with the moving of the governmental capital of Indonesia to Nusantara, and I think that really opens out a whole new business model for Sabah, Sarawak, and why not there is some sort of tax benefit that really, really costs. I mean, like when investors look at it, hey, instead of thinking to maybe even states like Penang, you can go to Sabah, Sarawak, and maybe we could have even better policies, like more ports, more like all the logistics are like just the next hub, literally. Like instead of going to Singapore, you come to Borneo.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like both of you are of more similar mind in terms of let's make it into like open market kind of thing. And now, of course, just to give you some illustrations, generally in Malaysia, people are not in favor of competition. And just use Sarawak, for example. Like West Malaysian lawyer cannot work in Sarawak. And of course, they say, look, in West Malaysia, you have 1,200 new lawyers called to the bar each year. In Sarawak, when I was called to the bar, I was less than, my number was less than 400.
Wow.
And that 400 was from beginning until my time. So is this a David and Goliath kind of market? But I mean, competition is how you survive, right? And there are ways, of course, to mitigate it. I mean, you look at California, for example, it was considered a golden state for a long time. And so if you go to California, you have federal tax and you also have state tax for a lot of things. So like for example, some of you watch NBA and things like that. You know, if you play in Texas with Houston or Dallas or San Antonio versus you play for one of the two LA teams, the tax difference could be 40 to 50% different. But then, of course, someone like Shaquille O'Neal was attracted to LA, and he earned less than if he go to Houston. But then, what the agent told him, well, if you come to LA, we can get you 2 or 3 Hollywood roles per year, and what you earn actually offset already. So there are ways to give incentives. So if you want to work in Selangor, you have to pay more tax, Penang, because you earn more. So there are ways to mitigate that. But now I want to ask you, because you both talk about let's make it into, okay, maybe competition is the wrong word. Let's open up. But maybe can you, like, I mean, I guess it's like, can you think of specific things that will really help states to regain more control, more autonomy? So, I mean, obviously, we already say in general terms, federal must give up power. But and of course, one of the issue we've been saying for a long time, you know, give us back local election, which we'll talk a bit later. But besides this macro issue, what are some of the things that you would like to see for all the states? I mean, not just Sabah Sarawak, for all the states. So maybe, David, we can start with you.
I think for economic-wise, now we have a new trend of rare earth. Rare earth actually is in Terengganu, in Perak. But I heard some of the YBs talking to me that they say we need federal help because it's too huge, we cannot process. And make me think about actually all the states, because they are too used to have the state kind of mind. We are negeri sahaja.
Yeah.
So they didn't process that as like Sarawak. Sarawak always think like we are somehow as a nation to process all the things. So they want to take back the health.
But that's the last 10, 20 years after S4S kind of taken root, right?
Yeah, but back actually in historical wise, Sarawak used to be a sovereign state under Brooks family.
Oh, yeah.
So we have this kind of mindset. We are a country, we are a state. But Perak, okay, we are just a land, just a negeri kind of thing. So if we want to decentralize, we want to give more power to state, only then we change our mindset, then we can process that. So I think most of the states leaders, they process all the things like, oh, we need federal's help. So we have to change the mindset. Then we can give the money to them, or we can give the money to them or give the power to them. They have the capacity to process. So for example, rare earth, like Terengganu and Perak have many rare earth in their land, and some of the things like I think this is more customized things. Like, okay, if Perak you have more silver or tin, will give you benefits, will give you tax exemption, you can collect the tax yourself. But it requires check and balance as well. So for Sarawak, if you have oil and gas, then we give you tax exemption, we give you more power, we give you more technique in that area. So for Sarawak, I think oil and gas, education, health can be done. But I think for Selangor actually can run by itself.
Yeah, it's like a country already.
Johor can run by itself to some extent. But to some very small state like Malacca, maybe like Kelantan, they might need to collapse with all other states around them. So I think if we look at that kind of, use the perspective to look at this combination, maybe we can have the more custom-made kind of setting.
Very interesting you mentioned this, because we do have models that we can look towards to, you know, like US obviously one model, Australia is another model. And you look at US, you have California, Texas, then you have Iowa, Wyoming, small states. But how they survive will be they began to specialize. You know, like Iowa is the biggest pork producer in the whole country. So if you find a niche, there's value for you. Lor. And that's what a federation should be, you know. But of course, you're absolutely right. That kind of mindset takes time. But I would say if we just follow the constitution right now, you see, talk about forestry, talk about agriculture is under state, talk about, you know, if we follow the constitution strictly, the state actually have a lot of power. But it's just everything has been federalized, even bananas, even rice. You know, even rice, you know, we're just such a control society. But we'll come to that a bit later. So Lara, how about you? You know, what are some of the things you think, practical things that can happen?
No, I mean, I was just thinking, why does the government need to control all the prices, you know? I mean, especially when some states are really, really good in producing agricultural produce and things like that. So why should there be like a centralized sort of government entity that is controlling, like what you mentioned, like rice? So, I mean, it's not just rice, like eggs and things like that. So all these things, why should all these things be controlled? I mean, even utility providers as well, you know? So I felt like with this, there should be a bit more healthy sort of competition because you're performing based on production. So if there is more incentive to really help people with that, and rather forming one centralized like entity like FELDA, for instance, I felt like we have seen the downside of FELDA. So if we could just decentralize from that model and really just give back the incentive to where people actually needed help, I think that would really, really benefit them. And maybe Malaysia might even be a nation that is really producing agricultural produce that can be exported. So there are many, many things that, I mean, because what's the best thing about Malaysia? I mean, we don't have disasters, natural disasters, and we also don't, well, I mean, we have a lot of land. I think land is really something that can help to generate, and some states are really having more land. So why not cultivate all this thing and really just begin to have like that supporting structure for economy to blossom, you know? So it's more like, I wouldn't see it like a competition per se. It's more like decentralization, decoupling from government-linked entities so that you can come to a place where, hey, let's look into productivity, let's look into the profitability of this whole thing, and if some produce are just not workable, like scrap it.
I mean, there's a whole discussion about big government versus small government, right? And so if you want you want small government, that means government have to kind of slowly reduce their role. But that's so difficult for politicians, right? You are so addicted to power. And I mean, look at government, their power really comes, of course, PMO, all this structure, but GLC is really the driver of the economy. But when you have price control, that's why Kamala Harris is being ridiculed at the moment, because she wanted to introduce, I mean, America of all places, you want to introduce price control. That's the land of free market. But of course, we know government should ensure that people are not exploited. You have enough food. You have a minimum decent living standard. But you can't be a nanny, right? Like taking care of everything. And this is not an easy shift, I guess. So, but anyway, I want to talk about the next. I mean, of course, we want to talk about local elections. But maybe we can now. Before that, you talk about agriculture, right? Which is something that Malaysia used to be a leader. In fact, sometimes I still meet with business people and some from Cambodia, Vietnam, and they still say Malaysia is still very respectable in terms of agricultural power and technology. And I just find that we are not leveraging on this legacy, And yesterday I just went to FNN and do a deal there, and they're building a few multi-billion-dollar farm, and they're bringing the special cows from US, and according to FNN, that the milk produced with this new generation cow will surpass like farmhouse. Like farmhouse is now the gold standard for barista and things like that. Those are pasteurized milk from Australia, but you still have to preserve it, bring it to Singapore, bring it to a factory here. So, but imagine your cow is here. You just cannot compare the freshness, right? So I'm just thinking we still had land, and so they're building on a few 100-acre site in Negeri Sembilan. So why not more of this? But people were kind of not very creative, right? Everyone is thinking, let's have more Musang King. But, durian is not easy to do. But anyway, that's a bit side point. Now I want to talk about, because of the culture of centralization, and really, I think the only way we can even begin this discussion is we need a top-down leader who is Prime Minister, for example, to be able to say, look, I am willing for more decentralization. Now, of course, he's doing that. PMX is doing that with Sarawak because of political bargain. But if today Johor asks for it, if today Selangor asks for it, if today Terengganu asks for it, it will not be entertained. But I want to kind of talk about something Prime Minister, recently David, you were involved also. Prime Minister just launched a Madani housing. It's a hot topic in this part of KL because we stay near here. But then he says something very interesting, which is like when people kind of complain about Madani housing, because I want to lead this discussion into local election, okay? And he was like, oh, I'm not going to entertain the elite, But it's not even rich versus poor, It's talking about town planning and things like that. Then I give you another example. Recently, Old KL Road, one of the oldest road in the whole KL, they introduced a bus lane, and it's going to operate from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. So Old KL Road, some parts only have 3 lanes. It's going to become 2 lanes and things like that. So people have said from OUG to go to Federal Highway, the amount of time double. But anyway, I want to come back to the whole topic about decentralization, be responsible for your personal choice, and talk about local planning. We live in a specific area, Tamang, and if somebody want to develop something huge, then the residents should have a say. And of course, for the longest time, Klang Valley, we're at the mercy of DBKL, Ampang, Subanjaya, those council. So, which leads me to the topic that once in a while we talk about here, which is local election, okay? And so I think because of time, maybe this will be our final topic for today. And maybe 16th of September, we should do another episode, okay, to continue part 2. Okay, so no specific question from me, but I just want, what's your thoughts on local election? Is it realistic, and is this something that will help us? Maybe start with you, David, first. Since you kind of work in a ministry that you actually still a local. We still have a local government, right?
Yeah.
So housing and local government are together now. And it's very interesting. But of course, Minister Nga Koming, one of the first thing he announced was no local election for foreseeable future. I understand politically where it's coming from. Because May 13 is always somewhat linked with local election kind of power given to Nam Bumi. But anyway, okay, let's hear what your thoughts on this. And then
for local election, actually, if we want to say we implement local election, it's actually we are restoring local election. We are not like we
not
want,
implementing. Going back to what we have.
Restoring local election. I think from British era we already have. And just now, as when I'm driving my car to this place, I'm thinking about, local election. Actually, I found that interestingly, why UMNO gained the people mandate to become the representative of people of Malaya to have negotiation in England is because in 1955, they have a big win in the local election.
Oh, interesting.
And this brings mandate to UMNO, and after the government become more centralized, then they take back our vote, our third vote, because of national security, because of we want to safeguard racial harmony, these kind of things. Suddenly we lost our rights to vote, to choose who can jaga our longkan, our lampu, our road, which is the daily basis of every people in this land.
Yep.
So why not we can start talking or discussing this by maybe we can make more people to think about that. Now, of course, they're saying that it's not suitable to implement this because of political stability. Logically, it's very logic. But why not we think about what we can do in the future? So for example, some people are discussing whether we can restoring KL mayor election. And all of us know DBKL is a huge, the biggest local authority in Malaysia. Somehow the power is same level as some ministry. So it's very huge. So there's no check and balance. And we all know that if we want to do business, apply anything in DBKL, of course, if you want to apply something, if it's very slow, there's corruption there. It's open secret already. Why we need to introduce this is because local election brings check and balance. But how about the suburban area? How about like Cebu? How about like Kapit? If we have local election there, is it cause another kind of corruption or another kind of hegemony of power or another kind of corruption? We don't know. So maybe this is a
more decentralized corruption.
It probably happened like Indonesia. We see after Jokowi, he just passed his button to provoke many hoo-ha in Indonesia. So it's always changing. It's always there. But one thing I need to point out is that this originally belongs to the people.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I think the suggestion about KL, especially Wilayah Persekutuan, having local election first makes a lot of sense because there's no state government. And, KL GDP is comparable to many states. Besides the biggest states, I think it is probably larger than many other states.
Yeah.
So with this kind of budget, how much DBKL is collecting from the rates and assessment. So, why not?
Yeah.
So, Lara, what about you? What's your thought on? It's an on and off topic in this show, right?
Yeah, I was also thinking about DBKL as well, as in because most of the construction industry projects we deal with local council a lot, and especially DBKL. So in a way, we have to know like the ins and outs. So I also like the idea that hey, why not start with KL first? Because of all the places, let's start with the federal territories. Because that's the easiest. You don't really have a sultan. You don't really have I think this would be a good time for
to experiment.
Yeah, to experiment and to make our DPM maybe a bit more popular,
Yeah, and also I think if you think about the people in KL Klang Valley, they are most likely more willing to participate. Because one of the criticism against local election is you're creating more burden. People need to come out and vote. I don't think anyone in KL will complain about needing to vote another Saturday. Everyone will be willing to give up the Saturday. Are you willing to give up Saturday?
For better DBKL, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't even have like another responsibility to vote for state election. So why not we start off with this? As in KL would be a
it
great
can be
place
the
to
same
experiment.
day as federal election.
Exactly.
Yeah?
You don't really have to trouble people. It's not troublesome at all. You just need to have like another ballot paper. That's it.
Yeah.
Then you campaign. Then let us see for ourselves who is the KL mayor and let's see with all this thing. With a lot of the recent events on sinkholes and things like that, there's a lot of finger pointing. Even with IWK was just saying, hey, we inspected our pipes already and everything is just fine. So I felt like, hey, let's just put them in that sort of place of accountability and let's start off with KL. You have the money, so money is not an issue. So I think if you wanted to say, okay, with certain states, it's not possible because we really, really don't have that sort of funding. Start off with the wealthiest. Like KL, as in that will be. KL people are generally more vocal. I felt like they are the ones where they will come out and say, hey, it's too overpopulated already. Stop building more Madani buildings here. All these voices come from KL. You don't hear from any other places as much as the ones in KL. So I felt like people maybe are a bit more ready to have a say over who should come to this place, because a lot of people are buying properties in KL address. It's because of the premium that it holds, because potentially it's an investment. So I beg to differ with what Prime Minister mentioned about competing with I don't care about what the elite are saying, but I felt like we should deal with the elitist sort of mindset, the establishment mindset, because if you have that sort of thinking that hey, all the people are against me, I felt like he is going into the category of being establishment himself, because why can't we have a freedom of speech? Why can't we just voice out what we felt like it's not practical? I mean, we're just talking about practicability here. So it's not really even going into how the corruption works within DPKL. So it's just practically, it's just overly condensed, and you don't want to have like, I mean, I've seen how it is in Greece, in Athens, where the riches and the slum is like just next door, like just literally by a line apart, and it's not looking good. As in, I mean, because on one side it's like the slum, and how are the tourists gonna view this place? Because you are wanting to come to a safe place, and then there is like potentially you can get robbed and things like that. So why not think of it from like many perspectives, that a lot of foreigners actually do like KL. So that could be a place, a heaven for investment.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because like local election naturally leads us to the topic of self-determination, and I think one of the topics we had wanted to discuss, but I think we'll leave it to the next episodes. And I think two points are maybe just a preview to our viewers and listeners, because one of the catalysts I think I mentioned earlier on for decentralization will have to be, I guess Prime Minister will need to play a role if he has that intention, but will someone be brave enough to do that? And PMX, of course, had all the right sound bites, all the right statement when he was in Perikatan Raya and Perikatan Harapan, but ever since he became government, we don't seem to see that. Of course, they always say, well, you don't understand, in government it's very difficult, we're working with UMNO, and things like that. So, but that will be one thing I want to discuss next as we approach 16th of September. Of course, the other thing I want to talk about as a preview will be Undi 18, okay? And Undi 18, maybe I would say, did you agree is one of the first expression of self-determination? And the result is not quite what people expect, right? I mean, we kind of talk about green wave and things like that, but that will be something I want to explore more in depth, because I think now we have enough time to let the whole green wave thing settle, so not to be too emotional about it. And because I think people still agree or disagree on that. But when you want to go into the process of self-determination, there are growing pains, right?